Okay, now it's working. So, welcome, Carolyn Costin. I'm very happy that you're here, and I am so glad that we have a bit of time to just talk about this very important topic about eating disordered, eating disorders, disordered eating, and diet culture in general. And
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to talking about these things.
perfect. And maybe before we start and just jump into the topic, maybe you can let us know about yourself just a bit. I, I to be honest, I talked about you like a lot in the intro, but maybe we can hear from you. Who are you?
Oh my gosh, that's a big question. I think the most important thing to overall to say is that, I recovered myself over 40 years ago from an eating disorder, and ever since then, I have been on a mission to help other people realize that they can be fully recovered, that you can get over this 100%, completely get over it. And that's been a long journey in a lot of different ways, from a therapist to running treatment centers to training therapists. And now I'm training coaches, and coaches who will really, I think, be a game changer in the world of eating disorders, because they can help therapists and dietitians, but they can help the clients in the moment. So a coach will actually go out to a meal with you, or go to your house and help you set up your kitchen, or be there at 1 o'clock in the morning if you feel like binging and purging, and you can give them a call. And I'm very excited about this. And that's in the Carolyn Costin Institute. So that's the newest thing I'm doing. And then, of course, I've written a few books. Probably the most popular one is 8 Keys to Recovery from an Eating Disorder, that I wrote with a former patient who became a therapist, Gwen Grab.
Yeah.
So that's a quick summary.
Well, that's a quick summary. Thank you very much for that. And I think there's a lot more than that, because I, for sure, have your book about yoga and eating disorders, which is also a very good one.
Thank you.
And yeah, but I think I stumbled across you with the 8 keys to recovery from an eating disorder, and you mentioned it earlier. I think one of the very different things that I've learned from you, or that I first heard from you, is the idea of fully recovering, fully being fully recovered. And I think many people who tried to recover, or who were suffering from an eating disorder, just learned or heard very often that it can get better, but they still have to deal with it in a way or another.
Right.
And this
That you
is
have to manage your illness for the rest of your life. A little bit like we treated addictions, like alcoholism, for example, where you have to kind of deal with it one day at a time, and you're always recovering. And that's just not true of eating disorders. It's just absolutely fundamentally not true. I've been recovered over 40 years, and I have thousands of patients now that either I've treated, or people who I've trained have treated, who are fully recovered and have been recovered for decades now. And I think that the way that it gets messed up is that, with all the genetic research and the things that we have learned over the years about eating disorders, I think they are a little bit misleading, in the sense that, yes, there is a genetic vulnerability of who's going to get an eating disorder. So you may have a genetic predisposition for being perfectionistic, or being impulsive, or there may be some traits that you have. And no, you're not going to lose those traits. That's in your genetic code. But you can fully be recovered from an eating disorder, and then you still maybe work on those traits of perfectionism. Maybe it shows up somewhere else, or your anxiety shows up somewhere else. You can continue to work on those things. But one of the things the eating disorder does is teaches you how to work on those things, because when you apply those things to food and weight, it's going to cause a lot of problems.
right. Yeah, right. So, I mean, if that's possible, is there anything you can the point the finger on, which is different from your approach to others?
I mean, I think more people are adopting the position that you can be fully recovered. When
Mhm.
I first started talking about it, over 30 years ago. I think people were more skeptical then. I mean, but they were listening because I was recovered. I had a lot of patients who were recovered, and this was early on. And I started talking about this before there was a lot of books and magazine articles and organizations about eating disorders. So I sort of grew up with the field and was talking about this in everybody's ear, all
Yeah.
along. And I think more people have adopted it. But I would say that that's a big, if there is a difference with people in the field, it's the ones who think that because there are some genetic predispositions for people who develop eating disorders, that some people call it a brain disease. I think that's silly. If you look at different cultures and different times and different countries in the past that don't, for example, without diet culture, you don't have eating disorders, or you have very, very few. So I don't think we can say that it's a genetic disease. And I think some people will just disagree with me about that.
Yeah. So I think which was very important was to see that it's just possible to recover, but also that you were open about your own history, which was kind of new, I guess, in a way, because therapists never mentioned that they were suffering from something like that, or they never experienced it. And this is, I
Yeah.
think, it's a very complex thing. Like eating disorders are so complex, it's so difficult to just um, heal like every part of it. And it
I,
feels like it's,
I
yeah.
think it's very sad that therapists are trained, it's the whole thing about self-disclosure. And I think it's sad that in some countries still, and even in the America, there are some treatment centers and some places that are less likely to have therapists disclose their own eating disorder. But to keep it a secret means that you think it's shameful. And it should not be shameful to have developed this illness and want to get over it. And also, I think people needed to see role models. When I did my first international conference, it was so interesting. It was many, many years ago. And a lot of people came up to me and said, I'm treating eating disorders, but I've never met anybody who's recovered. And I brought like 4 or 5 recovered patients who were completely recovered and had been recovered for several years. And I was thinking how sad it is to treat an illness. Imagine if you were a cancer doctor and you never met anybody who had recovered from cancer. That's pretty depressing. And I realized that people who are still struggling need to see role models of people who have made it, who can say, it's just not an issue in my life. I don't deal with it at all. I don't suffer anything dealing with, choosing my calories or trying to lose weight or weighing myself or any of that. It's all gone.
Yeah. And I think it's important that you say that because there are so many topics you just named. It's a shame, which is somehow always around eating disorders. That's why I want to talk about it in here, just to make it more, I mean, like what you're doing all the time, but making it more public, being more open about that. And it's also the hope that there is a chance to really get better. And I mean, what you're mentioning is more than many people experience. It's not just people with eating disorders that are somehow weird around food, but it's like the whole diet
Yeah,
culture.
right, right,
Because I
right.
mean, I know so many people which I believe they consider themselves as not having an eating disorder, but still are doing like super weird stuff around food, like working out all
Yeah.
day
Well,
and
we have a very weird culture around food wherever you go. And so there's this continuum, from dieting to disordered eating and all the way to a full blown eating disorder. And the thing about those who get the full blown eating disorder, they are probably more likely the ones, like if you take someone who's on a diet restricting their food, obviously a lot of people do that, and not everyone ends up with an eating disorder. So we can't say that diet culture causes it either. It's a combination of maybe you have an anxious, perfectionistic temperament, like I do. It's just better now. And you go on a diet, which I did with all of my friends. why was I the one who developed anorexia nervosa? Well, the reason is the dieting was a part of it, and the diet culture. This was around, I started dieting at the age when Twiggy was modeling, in London. And I'm probably dating myself a lot right now by saying that, but and so all my girlfriends and I went on a diet. I'm the one who developed anorexia nervosa because I was also the one who was pushing for straight A's. And I was also the one reading my homework on the school bus at night, with a flashlight coming back from a basketball game. There are combinations of things that cause this, and we have to look at all of them. That doesn't mean you can't be recovered.
That's right. That's right. And I also believe that, of course, diet culture is not just the only root of an eating disorder, but still, I believe that it's kind of a cultural burden because when our moms are raised like that, just having a closer look at their weight, and then again, they are doing it with us, then of course, we are also more like
Of
hyper
course.
vigilant around that. And so we somehow need to take it into consideration when we try to recover or when we try to get better. So this would be like a direct question to you. How can we recover into a world that is somehow crazy and around food and just
Yeah.
promoting diets all the time?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with my book, Your Dieting Daughter, but that book is really a book about how to fight back with the diet culture. And there's two editions, the early one and then the one in 2006, which is the later one, even though it's so long ago now. But the thing I talked about there is all the pressures and how we have to be the antidote. We have to find the antidotes to this toxicity, right? And different ways that I, for example, when I'm working with clients and talking to them about, I want to turn them into activists, so they feel like they have some power. So they are writing to advertising companies. They are making statements about clothing sizes. We do different things to try and show that we don't want to buy into it anymore, that we recognize what's happening with the airbrushing and all that. Because body image dissatisfaction is probably the number one predictor. There's a lot of predictors and different influences that cause eating disorders, but probably who has high body dissatisfaction, that's probably the number one predictor. So then you have to start to talk to people about acceptance and all shapes and sizes, and even what I talk to a lot about, body neutrality, which is you don't go from hating your body and trying to mold it into shape and whatever to loving it, but how about accepting it? How about just being neutral about it? It is what it is,
Yeah.
and so there's a lot of different avenues that you try to do. The other one, I guess I would say, is I spend a lot of time trying to cultivate people's relationship with their internal wise presence or soul self. And I think we don't have a lot of mentoring in this world actually for connecting with that we're actually souls who happen to have bodies rather than the other way around.
Right. The eight's key, so to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I just read your blog post about acceptance versus resistance. Maybe
Yeah.
something that I could link as well when it comes to body neutrality or body acceptance, because I think here, at least in Germany, I'm not sure how it is in the US, but most likely it's similar. Um, there is the idea that if you just eat healthily and just not eat emotionally or not binge and move in a healthy way, then you will end up in a straight size. And that somehow is not true for everyone.
It's not
So
too fair.
um,
I
it's
mean, if you look at I mean, certainly we do. We also have a problem in most industrialized countries where we do have a problem with people often not having access to certain kinds of fruits and vegetables, and healthier grains and things like that that make it easier for them to eat in a way that's more nutritious, for example. So where there is a problem with obesity in so many different countries, but even to say that kind of gets me in trouble because I don't want to be stigmatizing or all that. Because yes, there is a problem with that, but there's also all different shapes and sizes. And there is no specific, not everybody who's in it. What we've turned it into is everybody who's above this ideal size is the wrong size. And that's where the health at every size movement came in to show that we have to look at health, not people's weight. We have to look past whatever the number on the scale is, because you can be all different sizes and still be healthy. And as you know, you can be the ideal image of weight, and you can be, thin and what's considered the ideal type, and also be very unhealthy. So we have to look at it. I think that's the best way, as I'm constantly talking to people about, and to parents with their kids about, always focus on health. You don't even need to have a scale. There's absolutely no reason to ever have a scale. It's and when I go to the doctor's office, I say, no thanks, you don't need to weigh me, because take my blood values and take a urine sample and listen to my heart and lungs, and then let me know how I'm doing. But a number is not going to tell you that.
Yeah, yeah, I know now, but I didn't know earlier. And it's just when you say that, when it comes to doctors, I sometimes, it's just shocking that it seems like the cure for everything. My back hurts. Yeah, you need to lose weight. I have something here in my, I don't know, in my stomach. Yeah, maybe you should just lose some weight. And it's annoying, and it's, yeah, it makes me sad that it's also in Europe like this. It just absolutely reached us here, and the thin ideal, as you name it, I guess, is it's like everywhere. And okay, there's a lot of stuff, and I would like to ask you like 1,000 more questions. But when I wrote you and asked you for this interview, I especially had one thing in mind, and that was talking with you about a healthy self and eating disorder self. And I'm so curious about that because I really like that idea. It was like so very helpful to just separate from the eating disorder voice. And now, when it comes to IFS and the idea of parts, just more than just the two parts, but just in general parts. And I think we would consider the eating disorder part as like a protector, something that is trying to
Yeah.
protect you in a way, and which is really good intentions, but still it's annoying. And I
Well,
mean, like,
I actually know Richard Schwartz, who developed IFS, and I've had the opportunity to sit with him and work with him. And I think it's a fascinating and important work, but I think he does it better than most, because I think some people take that concept and become way too interested in all their various parts, and they may end up a little more split. And I've seen that happen. And so I try to make it really simple with my philosophy, and just in terms of talking about, people with eating disorders have over time developed, and I think he would say this way also, have over time developed this other ego state. And this ego state is the one that says, oh, you shouldn't eat that, and you shouldn't eat this. And if you eat that, you have to go for a run. Or if you eat ice cream or pizza, you have to get rid of it. You have to purge it somehow. And all these different things that are related to food and weight. But what's interesting is, once you're in the grips of that, and that's been around for so long, you're sort of brainwashed, and it doesn't feel anymore like it's a choice. It becomes an obligation, and your healthy self gets quieter, sort of pushed down underneath there. And I always wait for people to say something, for my clients to say something or bring up something that helps me point this topic out. And the reason is because I don't want to say to people, oh, you must have these two parts, and they think I'm calling them crazy or something. But it always comes out. Like, someone will say, I told myself not to binge, And then I found myself standing in front of the refrigerator binging. Well, even when you say, I told myself, there's a part speaking and a part listening, right? Who are you telling when you say, I told myself? Or you say, I found myself in front of the refrigerator binging. Or a client who says, I want to follow my meal plan and I want to add more food because I know I'm underweight. But then I get to the meal and all of a sudden another part of me just freaks out. And I say, oh, there it is. Another part of me. So you see, you have these two parts. So if, because sometimes people feel a little bit like, what are you talking about? I have two parts. So I try to let them be the ones to explain. And usually it comes up when people are describing their ambivalence. Someone who binges definitely is saying, take this away from me. I hate this. Please take it away from me. And then that night they have a binge. And so I say, so there's a part of you who's in my office saying you don't want to do it. And where was she last night when you started binging, at 10 o'clock at night? Where was the part that was in my office? Those two parts have to start talking to each other. And I got this concept from my own healing because I remember when I was struggling with anorexia and I had nothing to go on. At that point, there were no books, no articles. And I realized a particular evening, I was talking to myself and I was telling myself, don't eat cookies. And then another part of me was like, that's easy for you to skip cookies. What would be hard is to learn how to eat just a couple and I had this whole dialogue with myself. And later, when I became a therapist, I remembered that dialogue and realized that other people were having dialogues in their head all the time, but never stopping to then say, well, which one do I want to strengthen? Which one do I want to win this battle? I want to choose the healthy self. And some people will say, well, I don't know if I have a healthy self. And always I ask them, what would you tell your best friend to eat? What would you feed your 7-year-old daughter? And always there's a healthy self in there. It's just not coming out for them. It comes out for other people, but not for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, happy that you noticed it in yourself and made it to a concept, because it is indeed very helpful. And I have two more questions when it comes to this. It's just number one, you just started with it, is how can we strengthen the healthy self? How can we do this? How can we feed the healthy self? Because I
The
think
first one
that's
is giving it some airtime. So that's why the first thing I do, let's say someone has a certain eating disorder behavior that they engage in, and we're talking about trying to help them stop. So I'll tell them, write before you do it. And I don't even care what you say, just write, because generally the writing is going to be about the eating disorder self is going to say, let's say it's a binge. I just want to eat this food and I don't want to be stopped. And Carolyn told me to write this and I'm really mad at her, but I'm going to write it anyway. And I just want what I want right now. And it just feels like I just want to distract myself from all the stuff that happened today. Whatever it is they write. But the most important thing about that assignment is to then say, okay, now write back to that part of yourself. Write back and say all the reasons why you don't want to binge, why it's making you uncomfortable, why you don't like the side effects from binging, why it makes you feel ashamed. Write all the other. So what's happened over time is the eating disorder self is getting all this airtime in your head and nobody is stopping to write back. And a lot of times when I tell people to write, at first they don't see how that can make a difference. And they think, well, I just know I should stop, And I say, no, the reason you have to write back is because that's how you strengthen something, by giving it a voice, by paying attention to it, by letting it say what it needs to say. I think that too often what therapists will do is we'll play the healthy self and we'll tell the person all the reasons why they shouldn't binge or whatever. That's not good enough. The person has to be able to speak it themselves, because that's the practice and that's the part that gets stronger.
yeah. The thing is, what is so complicated about that, at least in my own experience, this was like the last really tough thing is that because it was always my coping mechanism when it came to shame, when it came to negative emotions. And then in the phase of my life when I was the most ashamed, in a way, because my body was changing and so much stuff was going on, and a part of me was still in the thin ideal world, but I understood that in a healthy way I can never be like this. And then there was a lot of shame. It felt not that deep anymore, but still it was there. And then I didn't have my coping mechanism. So
Yeah, and what we always talk about is, look, people use it as a coping mechanism. That's definitely true. And so I don't want to take that away in the sense that I say, yeah, I know it's a coping mechanism. You're not a stupid person. You used it for a reason. You had a good reason to start doing this. So, but there's side effects to your coping mechanism. So what we have to do is that we have to find other coping mechanisms. Then people will say, well, there isn't anything as good. And I say, well, maybe someone who is addicted to heroin once said there's nothing as good as heroin, but all the side effects to heroin are just too much. So again, then I go back to what if you had a daughter? What would you tell her? Oh, use this as a coping mechanism, honey. No, you would try to help her find other coping mechanisms. And then over time, and this is when you start reaching out to people for help. You really want to do the behavior, it becomes automatic almost, so it's hard to break even if you want to break it. And so you have to start reaching out to people, and that's why. And I know a lot of therapists don't want to take phone calls in the middle of the night or in the middle of the day. So that's what the coaches are really there also to do is you know reach, unless there's a therapist or a dietitian or even a friend, it's good to have somebody, but ultimately what I say is, and this is key 7, I think, yeah, you have to reach out to people rather than your eating disorder behavior to get your needs met. So if you feel like restricting, or you feel like throwing up your food, or you feel like taking those laxatives or whatever it is, and you're telling yourself, I'm just going to do it, reach out to a person first, because over time then you create new neural pathways in your brain. And honestly, it gets easier and easier and easier, because like anything, doing the eating disorder behavior becomes habitual, and it becomes the response to feeling certain ways, like you were saying about the shame or whatever. And over time, you just create new responses. And by the way, then those become automatic. And you may need some help creating them at first, but after a while, they take a life of their own. And then it's not one day at a time struggle. Then that becomes the new pathway and the new coping mechanism.
right. And maybe that's a good point, also to find an end, because it just popped up for me. It takes a village to raise a child, and I think it also takes a village to just heal from an eating disorder, which is why maybe a coach is a very important thing to get some support. And there is this thing that many people believe that they don't really need help because it's not too bad. It's not like a real eating disorder. It's just a bit messed around food, and I'm anxious all the time, but not too bad. And would you say this is also a thing when a coach can help?
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the things that the coaches are currently doing is try to help prevent people from going on to an eating disorder where they have to get higher levels of treatment. So the coaches are at all levels, working with people to help prevent it from going so far, or working with people that have already gone too far and helping them, recover. So it's along all levels, actually. And the 8 Keys book was really meant to do that also, because there's not that many coaches, and this is just starting the whole coaching thing. And a lot, I'm very pleased and touched by how many people have gotten help from that book, because it is kind of like a coach, that we actually talk to people in that book as if we're coaching them. And that's why there's a lot of assignments. I can't stress enough about doing the assignments. And because a lot of times people read the book, but they don't put the effort in. when you do the assignments, that's what starts to train your brain. That's what starts to strengthen your healthy self,
Yeah.
to come back and be the one in control. And that's why I say I don't go in and try to take the eating disorder self away. What I try to do is, it's the behaviors that are wrong, not that part of yourself. That part of yourself will be integrated back so you become a whole person again. And that part of yourself will be a part that tells you when something's wrong, or something needs to be attended to, or you need to pay attention to this, or you need some nurturing or comfort, or whatever it is. You don't get rid of that. Yeah, I don't come in and say, I'm going to take this away for you. What I say is, I'm going to integrate it back, because now you're a split off person. You have two parts of yourself, the way you treat yourself and the way you would treat everybody else,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. And I will definitely link the book and the website and the site where you can find coaches, because I really, and honestly, I'm normally not a big fangirl, and definitely not in the podcast, but I really loved your book. It's
Thank
just
you so
amazing. I
much.
had like the book, the workbook, and the audiobook, like totally equipped. And it's a pity that it's not in German, but I can absolutely link the English version, and it's just such a good start and such a good company. So
Well, I really appreciate that. And if you want, if there is a publisher there, I can, and you get in contact for me, I can try to put my American publisher together with somebody there, and they just might do it. All they really need is somebody to translate it. So
that is
um,
a very good idea. I would do a lot that this happens, because it would be so helpful. It would be so helpful. Yeah, to
okay.
the publisher. I might know someone. So I was just thinking, but that is for after the
Okay.
podcast. Thank you very much, Carolyn. I really
Oh, thank you
appreciate
so
this.
much for having me. I really hope this helps people and gives them some hope and motivation. And I always say, I didn't have any magic skills or talent. So I always say, if I can be recovered, you can too.
Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
very much. Yes.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.